That's fine.
And if anybody has any questions, there is a top bar, or just however you want them to ask you, Nancy. I'll leave that up to you if you want them to wait till the end or during the whole process.
Well, I think we can just sort of take it as it goes, and if people have questions, you're welcome to interrupt, and or if you've got comments or anything, please feel free to interrupt. I may be asking you to interrupt more if I keep stumbling over my tongue today. And I woke up this morning, so like just as a word of warning, if my voice starts crapping out, it's because all the pollens and stuff in the air. I woke up this morning, I was really, and yesterday, just all bleh. Anyway, so we'll just do the best. Oh, lucky you, Barb. Yeah, definitely keep your cameras off, your video off. It also not only helps stabilize your internet, but it also utilizes less of a carbon footprint. So.
Oh, and Nancy, I will make you the spotlight for everyone. So that way the recording is only recording your face and nobody else. So if anybody does come onto the camera, they won't be seen on the recording.
Okay, cool. Oh, but now all I can see is me. Jeez. Okay. So I didn't do like a PowerPoint presentation or anything like that because what I want to do today is talk a little bit, but also tell stories and share songs. So so like I said, feel free to ask. If I can answer your question, I will. If I can't, I'll let you know. It may mean we all have to go do more learning. I'm always learning. But I just want to start just with a little bit of an introduction, you know, tell you who I am. So, and I want to do this, you know, kind of in the way that I've been taught to introduce myself. And I will get to that as I'm going through this. Okay, Candace? So, Ani Bojo, Sego, Wache, Kwekwe, and greetings. Manoa Semak Majakwa Kwen Kaz Makwa no Dodem. Guelph Nadunjaba. Meanwhile, Nipissing University, Nibising Territory, Anishinaabe Territory, Igwa Doda. So I just told you my name, and sorry, my Anishinaabe is getting rustier by the day because I'm not getting enough. Oh, Masi Cho, Dringwinzi, Candace. Anyway, so my name my English name is Nancy. My name translated from Anishinaabe Moen roughly means lightning on a clear day woman, but it's more about that that responsibility of being a catalyst and creating space for change or shifting in you know spaces and stuff like that. I'm Bear Clan, and I'm actually Mohawk on my birth mother's side as well as European. So I identify as a person who is of Mohawk and European descent. I grew up in Guelph, and my part of my birth family's roots would be in Six Nations, and previous to that it would have been south of the border because they were loyalists who came north after as a result of the War of 1812. So my teachings so have been largely Anishinaabe teachings, largely because that's the territory that I have spent most of my adult years. I was adopted, as you may have gathered from my use of birth mother. And my younger two are Anishinaabe, members of Bikdagung Anishinaabeg First Nation up near Marathon. my older two on their dad's side are also Mi'kmaq, and as well as African American, African Caribbean. So we're a family of, sort of many mixed nations. And so having been an adoptee, it's always been really important to me to understand identity. And as time went on and I was given the opportunities to learn a lot more from so many people, so many very gifted people in so many parts of Anishinaabe territory. A big reason why I was doing all of this is so that I could teach my kids the little teeny tiny bit that I know, so that they could pick up that, plus pick up more, because a lot of this really is about reclaiming knowledge from the disruptions that have been caused by colonization. So, and one way that we did that, primarily my younger two and I, would be by going, when we were living in Parry Sound and later when we lived here in North Bay and South River, going and singing every week with a group of women from Wasauksing First Nation and from Hemville Inlet First Nation. And so we did this for about 10 years, and it was actually my sanity saver while I was doing my dissertation, getting together and laughing and sharing songs and sharing food and sharing stories. And so the other part of this too then is the role that stories play is really, really important, not just in Indigenous cultures. And I want to emphasize cultures, because too often there's this idea that there's just one single homogenous Indigenous culture, and that's not accurate. Candace, I'm not sure where you're from, but I can see by you using Masicho, you're from, up in Northwest Territories or, Yukon possibly, right? I spent a couple of years in Old Crow in the Yukon, which is a fly-in First Nation that's Funtuck-Within territory. Okay, cool. Anyway, but like Gwich'in territory is not the same as Mohawk, or Gwich'in culture rather, is not the same as Mohawk culture, and it's not the same as, any of the Anishinaabe cultures. And there's several nations that fall under the Anishinaabe umbrella. And it's not the same as Navajo or Diné or, Seminole or Creek or Chickasaw or any of them. They're all very different cultures and all very different nations. So to me, this is really about starting that process of understanding the knowledge that people have managed to carry despite colonization, bringing it forward and doing it in ways that are consistent within those cultures. So storytelling is a really big, element of that, particularly since stories were one of the primary modes of teaching prior to Europeans coming over here. There wasn't, sort of the formal academic school thing, but stories are really, really important in that process. But before I get going any further, what I wanted to do is just start off by sharing a welcoming song. And this is actually a song that comes from Maggie Paul, who is Mi'kmaq from Realistically. No, and now it's, the thing about getting older and you lose brain cells, takes memories with you. Anyway, but she many years ago had come up from the East Coast, and she spent a lot of time in different communities in Ontario. So one of the songs that she shared was this welcoming song. And one of the things that I want to say about songs, Indigenous songs, before I do this, is a lot of times they're sung without a lot of words. There's more what's known as vocables. I guess we should admit that person. So they're vocables, so they're sounds, they're not words, so they don't necessarily represent a particular lyric, if you will. They represent a feeling or a thought, an intention, right? Some songs do have words. This is one that does have some words. It's also got vocables. The other thing about a lot of the songs that we sing is that they're done in sort of four rounds. So one to, to greet each direction. And the way that I've had it explained to me, and this is one of the few Haudenosaunee teachings that I carry, the Mohawk teachings, or in is that there's no word in the language for prayer. The closest that you come is by using the word that expresses putting your song on the ground, so putting it out as an offering. So even though that sounds maybe a little bit religious, it's not. It's that spiritual, it's that connection to things bigger than yourself. So when you're singing a song, you're singing for your people, you're singing for creation, you're singing for gratitude, to express gratitude. So I just want to share this song because it welcomes all those helpers into this circle. And we may not have a very big circle, and it may be a circle that's very spread out over geography, but we're all connected. We're all in relationship here just by virtue of being here. So I just want to do that welcome and put it out there, and then I'll talk a bit more about stories. Cuando So, and I have no idea if my voice is sort of overpowering the mic. So if it is, I apologize. But I don't have a really good mic setup or anything here, so just crossing my fingers. Thank you, Francine.
Sorry, I had goosebumps. So thank you, Nancy. That was beautiful.
Miigwech, thank you. So where I wanted to start is just to talk a little bit about stories, and I have no idea, other than Francine and Barb, I know those you two, but the rest of you I don't know. So I don't know how what your background is or where you're coming from and what knowledge you carry. So what I wanted to do is just sort of talk about Indigenous stories in general, because one of the things that I've run into, and like when I teach, especially like when I'm teaching like an intro to Indigenous studies course, I will start with something like a portion of the creation story. The one about Sky Woman or Gishgokwe, when she comes down to the earth and when it's still a water world and actually creates Turtle Island, which is what we know as North America. But there are so many stories out there, and because I feel like personally, I feel like I'm coming into this so late in my own life. And it's just incredible, the richness of the stories that are out there, and whether they're old stories, really old stories like creation stories, or whether they're personal stories that maybe have been passed down through a couple of generations, or that a person is carrying. But for me, this is so, vital to understanding who we are. And I say that having come into my role as an academic now, having spent the last 20 years working as a counselor in Indigenous mental health and Indigenous women's services. So listening to the personal stories of people needing to sort through whatever it is that they came to see me about. And so, it's just, they're formative. We go through our lives listening to our stories, whether it's the stories that we're raised with by our families, or stories that we acquire as we go through life experiences and so forth. Stories that, like if I asked all of you, what is your favorite story, each one of you would have at least one that you could identify without even thinking about it. So for me, it might be something like Lord of the Rings, or something like, I don't know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And those kinds of stories are a lot of fun to read. But one of the challenges that is sort of in front of us as peoples is how the English language and the undertones of sort of dominant culture frame stories as being something that's fictional and only fictional, right? And by doing that, then those stories really don't carry a lot of weight. And it's important to recognize that in all cultures globally, at some point in history, we're completely oral history, oral transmission of knowledge based, right? So stories are a really important vehicle for transmitting knowledge in different ways. So it can be a story that's a teaching story. It can be a story that's an entertaining story. Oftentimes stories do all of those things. And then more too, it's interesting in listening to a story, or reading a story, or watching a story. If you listen to it, read it, or watch it more than once, you will often take something away with you each time that's different from the time previous, right? Or it may be the same thing, but at a deeper level. And so that's why stories are so important, because they may be repetitive, and you may have heard it already before. It's like, even to the point of rolling your eyes and, oh my God, do I have to listen to this again? But you can take, if you think about it as you're listening and allow yourself to process it, you take more and more away from that story. And what you take from it may not have anything to do with what's in the story, or it may be very much about what's in the story. And your takeaways may not be the same as somebody else's as well. So it allows for a process of internalized reflection, right? What does this mean? What does it mean when so-and-so did this to the other person, and this is the end result, right? So when we think about how stories play such a central role, like there are other ways of teaching things, like teaching by doing, right? So like, how do you construct a canoe? Well, it's a lot easier to teach how to do that if you actually take a person through the process of constructing that. Same thing with riding a bike. You can't learn how to ride a bike just by reading about it. right? Or just by hearing about it. But if you actually go and do it, you can learn how to do it so effectively that your body internalizes that memory. And it doesn't matter how old you get or how many years you've not been on a bike, you will remember how to do it, even if you can't do it very well, for a little bit until you regain those skills. Stories act in a different way, in the sense that they can create a very fun environment for learning. So if you think about your favorite childhood stories, what were the common elements? Was it something like humor? Was it something like absolutely ridiculous, sort of magical thinking, kind of, pie in the sky stuff? Was it because it was very comforting? There's all sorts of different elements that can create that kind of entertainment. Sometimes it's like a really scandalous story that you're like, oh my God, and everybody's going tee hee hee behind the hand, but everybody's going, oh, I know exactly what that meant. So in creating that space for learning in a way that is free of pressure, it enables people to learn what they need to learn in the time that they need to do that, right? So it's kind of like, if it's the right time, it will happen. If it's the right, if it's the thing that needs to happen, it will, right? So that kind of an idea. And, and I was saying that colonization has significantly disrupted a lot of the knowledge here. One of the ways that a lot of the knowledge has been kept going is through the stories that people continue to share, whether it's within families or communities or whatever. And it's so important to recognize too that, like I mentioned, there are so many different cultures here. If you think about like a map of Europe, for example, and you'll think about, like, if you pay attention to maps, not everybody does, but you'll know there's like France is right beside Belgium and Luxembourg and Brussels, and then Switzerland's over there and Italy's, on its border, and then there's Spain and all of that. And so there's all these countries within this one particular geographical area. And then beside those guys are then all the Eastern European countries. And I don't keep up on what the current names for a lot of them are, but places like the Ukraine and Poland and what used to be Yugoslavia and so on. What has happened here is that people have forgotten that here there were, not nation states like what we see over in Europe. That and a lot of that was a result directly of the way things got carved up after the Second World War. But here there were neighboring nations and territories that often sort of overlapped. And if you think about the whole of North America, there were over 100 different nations, well over 100. And just in Canada alone, there's 12 different language groups. So over in Europe, you've got 4. You've got the German-based languages, you've got the Latin-based languages, and Scandinavian-based languages, and then Slavic. Over here, there's like 12 different language, sort of families. So, and then within that, you've got you've got 70 distinct languages, and within those, another, whole huge variety of dialects based on community. And so when you think about language and story, one of my points to this is that each culture and each language will have its own you know, sort of characters in Anishinaabe stories. A main character is Nanabojo. In Mi'kmaq territory, it would be Glooskap. If you go to Cree territory, it would be something like Wisaki Jack. If you go out in the West Coast, it's Raven. If you go down into the US, there's Coyote. And then, of course, there's other characters as well that show up. You know, like I mentioned, Sky Woman or Gishko Kwe, and so on. So each, there's another character like Dashkea out in the West Coast. So all of these characters are, you know, like they carry, you know, sort of important roles in the stories, because what they do is reflect back to us human beings our foibles and our, you know, the strengths that we have, but also the areas that where, you know, we often fall down on our faces. And Mohawk stories have twins, but there's a one in English it's called Good and Evil, but that doesn't actually reflect the understanding of, it's more of a yin and yang, right? So the good one goes around creating all things and the evil one goes around destroying them. So, you know, where the good one had created lovely, lush, flat, you know, fields and forests, the evil one went around smashing things up. So we end up with mountains and chasms and stuff like that. So I've heard of the hero twins, but I don't know enough about that, about those two, Candace. Anyway, so you and I are both going to have to do some more research, it looks like. The other thing too about the language issue is a lot of times we'll talk about like characters like Coyote or Raven, and often it ends up feeling like there's a tendency to use the pronoun he, but in many Indigenous languages, there is no real emphasis on gender. So, you know, so a being like Raven or Crow or Coyote or Bear or any of them wouldn't have a gender attached to them necessarily. So it's something to keep in mind, especially as I start telling a couple of stories. The other interesting thing, and I just want to point this out before I tell you a story. Some of the stories go back to prior to the Ice Age, last Ice Age, right? And people often say, well, you know, there's a lack of understanding around how people relied on memory and how far back memory can actually go, you know. But for it, because currently we're so text-based, we're so, yeah. Oh, thanks, Sandra. That looks cool. I'm gonna have to take a look at that one. Anyway, so yeah, so memory, like people would be coached in repeating the story. So you hear it an awful lot initially as a child growing up and all of that. But then as you start taking on that role of knowledge transmission to the next generation, you've also been coached in ensuring that you're, you know, transmitting the knowledge accurately, right? So, and that's how memory can be passed down generation after generation. It's also how a huge amount of knowledge can be significantly disrupted or destroyed even if there is an entire generation or two generations that gets wiped out. So yeah, so I wanted to raise a couple of those points. So, and the other thing too that that stories really do is help teach how to behave, you know. In the Apache territory, they use stories or references to places where stories took place as a way of admonishing somebody or giving somebody heck if they're behaving inappropriately, right? So they would just start a story. So, you know, and there's a really great book by Kenneth Basso called Wisdom Sits in Places, where he talks about this. And it's just absolutely wonderful because then you get to see how story can be used so effectively in ways that you know, like Western society really doesn't even consider, right? So anyway, all right. So what I wanted to do, oh yeah, so what I wanted to do is share a couple of stories with you. So the first one that I'm going to share with you is one that I understand is Oneida. Now, and I should also say this. Stories and songs, depending on the culture, have protocols around how you pass those on and stuff. So the stories that I'm telling here are stories that have passed into, you know, sort of the broader public realm by way of children's books, or, you know, people have shared them. So so even while that has some problematic elements to it, I also, you know, one of the challenges we all have is trying to find enough people, are finding the people who carry the knowledge, right? Yes, absolutely. So much of that knowledge gets passed. It gets lost as elders pass away. Although I do have friends who would argue that nothing actually gets lost. It simply goes and rests for a while until it's needed again, and will be picked up again eventually down the road. So depending on your concept of time, that may or may not, you know, make much sense for you. But yeah, it's out there. But in any event, I mean, you know, many people have done a huge amount of work to try and preserve the knowledge that is out there. So the story that I wanted to start off with is a story called The Story of the Flying Head. And there's more than one story called this, but I'm going to tell this particular one because this was one of my favorite ones in a book that my kids had when they were little. And it talks in part about how dogs ended up becoming you know, such close companions to humans, and why humans look after dogs the way that they do. So you'll have to think back to what this whole country, you know, this whole Turtle Island would have looked like a long time before we had things like buildings and cars and stuff like that, back when there was only forest. Now, Oneida are semi-agrarian people, and so they would raise crops like the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash. So that meant that they would clear areas where they could plant. And so the village would be in the clearing, and then the fields around the village. And then you would see the edge of the woods, right? So there would be quite a large space in between the edge of the woods and the village. So back when this story occurs, there was a man who had a couple of dogs. Now, everybody didn't have dogs at this time, apparently, but he did. And some people did, but maybe didn't look after them too well or whatever. So one day he had gone out to go hunting because he and his family were running low on meat, and you know, Oneida people lived in Longhouse. So when I say family, I mean everybody in the Longhouse. And so he went out to go hunting to see if he could find some deer or something like that. And he took his two dogs with him because he had a good relationship with them, and they would always look after him, and they helped him hunting. They would help flush out, game and so on. And so they walked, and they'd gone quite a long way. He started out early in the morning, and so around lunchtime, he got to a point where he was quite a ways from the village. And off in the distance, he started hearing this great big crashing, thundery, crackly, really scary sound. And the dogs started acting really nervous. And then he could hear this horrible, horrible sound, almost like a freight engine, but louder and scarier. And he could see off in the distance, the trees were starting to, sway back and forth. And it was like a great big monster was trying to wade through the trees. And so, in realizing that there was something coming his way, he decided he had better, start heading back to the village, and quite quickly, because he had heard stories from others that periodically a monster would show up in the forest. So he started running, but this monster was fast, just so fast. And so, he heard that screaming sound getting closer and closer and closer. And he was only about halfway there when the dog stopped, and one of the dogs turned to him and said, "I am only given this opportunity to share words with you once, but I want to tell you, get back to the village and get people safe in the water. I will stay here and defend you and protect you, and whether it takes my life or not." And so the man was completely shocked because his dogs had never ever talked to him before. And he was like, "What are you saying?" He said, the dog said, "There is the flying head monster is coming, and you need to go now. Don't let my death be in vain." And so the man, just sort of not really quite knowing what to do, started stumbling off towards the village, and the other dog kind of grabbed him by the wrist and helped hold them along. And so he ran, and in the background, he could hear that monster getting close and close, and the dog that had stayed back started getting growling and all of this. And then he heard the two of them fighting, and then he heard the dog yelp, and then he knew the dog had died. But it had stopped the flying head monster for a little bit to give him a bit more space to get closer to the village. Well, the two of them kept running, but that monster kept getting closer and closer. The second dog stopped, and he said to the man, "You keep going. You've got to save the village. I will stay here, and I will, protect you and try and hold off the monster as long as I can." And so the man, not knowing what else to do, said, "Thank you," and carried on running, and he heard in the background, the dog and the monster fighting, and then he heard the dog yelp, and then he heard no more noise from the fighting, but he could hear that screaming noise getting closer once again. At this point, he just managed to get to the edge of the clearing area, and called the people and told them to get into their boats and or onto, to hang on to their canoes and just get into the river and get away from this big flying head monster. So the monster came to the edge of the forest, but because there were no trees, he couldn't make it into the clearing and couldn't attack the people. And so the monster ended up leaving and going away. After that, the man gathered his family and gathered the whole community together and shared the story about what the dogs had, done in giving their life up to try and protect him and protect people. And from that day on, the people always saw dogs as being, not just animals that could help carry things, but really their relatives, their close friends and companions. So that's a story that not everybody, I think, has maybe heard. I hope not, as everybody has heard. But if you live in areas where there's heavy forestation, one of the monsters you have to worry about are massive forest fires. So that's what that one is. And can you imagine trying to tell a child about a massive forest fire in a way that doesn't terrify them, but still gives them, information to think about? Thanks, Francine. So the other thing that I wanted to do is I'll share a song as well, because one of the things that I think happens is, people get really used to hearing powwow music, and powwow music is awesome. But if you don't spend time in communities or going to socials and stuff, and again, every culture has its own forms of music and social music, as well as ceremonial songs and so forth. So but for the women that sing in this region, a lot of the times what we end up singing are really old songs. Some are newer songs, and some are really new that maybe have been around in different forms, or just but never sort of put out there as a public thing. So I want to share again kind of a child-centered thing, but really, who doesn't love a good lullaby? So there's a woman by the name of Pura Fay, who has been a singer and musician for many, many years. And she sings with a group called Eulalie. And her grandmother, one of her grandmothers, would sing this lullaby. So she actually ended up recording it. And it's one that we sang with, like, as Minway, the group that I sang with, starting to sing with again. Anyway, but I wanted to share this because, like, we know that there's lullabies out there in Western culture, but you don't often hear lullabies from Indigenous cultures. So this one, I don't know the full origins of it. I just know it as Grandma Easter's lullaby. And I, from what Pura Fay had said, this was something her grandmother sang because her grandmother sang it. So anyway. Amma, 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 hey ya. Amma, amma, hey ya. Amma, 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 hey ya. Amma, hey ya, hey ya. Hey, hey, hey ya. Hey, hey, Amma, hey, hey, Amma, 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 hey, Amma, Amma, hey, Amma, 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 hey, Amma, hey, hey, Ah, ah, hey, hey, So the last story that I wanted to share with you, I figured it's probably kind of appropriate if I share something that's from this territory. And I am in Nipissing, and I should acknowledge that because I'm a guest here as much as anybody who's not from the Nipissing territory originally. So I want to belatedly put that out and just acknowledge that and express my gratitude for being able to be a guest here in this territory. But one of the trees that's so common here is the birch tree or the wigwas tree, right? And so there's a story that I came across that I really, it was originally recorded on a YouTube video and it was done for kids. And I thought it was so great because, one of the things that so many stories do is attempt to create an explanation for why things are the way they are. And even though the explanation itself may feel a bit fantastical or whatever, at the same time, it's still giving you useful information, like about why, like what characteristics there might be to pay attention to. So in this one is about how birch tree got the black stripes. And I know that there are different stories. Some are from Cree territory, some are from Anishinaabe territory. Anyway, so the story goes like this. So once upon a time, very, very, very long time ago, there was a medicine man who was attempting to do some, he had some medicine he was picking and, excuse me, and some work that he was trying to do. And so the birch tree was watching him and he said, you're really doing a lot of work. Can I help you? Because you look like you're, so busy and everything. And so the medicine man said, well, maybe. Can you sit here and pay attention and watch the fire so it doesn't go out? Because I've got medicines that are simmering in that pot there, and if the fire goes out, then it will, like the medicines will be no good. And so Wigwas, the birch bark tree, said, oh yeah, I can watch it, no problem. And the medicine man said, are you sure? Because I do have a lot more that I need to go and gather, and if you can keep an eye on it, then I would be really grateful. And Wigwas said, yes, absolutely. Off you go. And so, a little bit reluctantly, but agreeably, the medicine man said, okay, you look after the fire. Off I go. So he went off. And he was gone for some time. And Wigwas, stayed there and he watched the fire and, sort of poked it a little bit, make sure it didn't go out and stuff. But the medicine man was gone for so long that Wigwas got tired and fell asleep. And when he woke up, it was to the medicine man poking him, saying, you were supposed to keep the fire going. What happened? How could you fall asleep? And Wigwas said, oh, I'm sorry. I just I was just tired and I just fell asleep. I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry. And the medicine man said, well, now I got to go and make the whole batch over again. And Wigwas said, I am so sorry. I will help. I will look after it this time for sure, for sure. And the medicine man said, fine, I will give you one more chance. And Wigwas said, okay. So the next day, the medicine man got the fire going, got his medicines in the pot and got that going. He said, don't you fall asleep. You make sure. Wigwas said, yes, I will not fall asleep. I will make sure I stay awake. Medicine man said, okay. And off he went to go and collect some more medicines. And so Wigwas sat there and he was trying to do a really good job of staying awake and keeping the fire going properly and all of that. But the medicine man was gone again a long time. And Wigwas was not very good at keeping his eyelids open. And so he ended up falling asleep once again. And again, the medicine man came back and woke him up. Except this time, it wasn't just to poke him and say, "What are you doing?" This time, he came at him with a branch of pine needles. "What are you doing? You fell asleep." And he started hitting Wigwas. "You just ruined all the medicine. I can't believe you did this to me. Go away. Just leave me alone." And Wigwas was so upset, he started to cry, and he had his little sappy tears running and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." And all the places where the pine needles had been hitting him were coming up as little black marks because he was so upset, and it was just really sad. He said, "I'm so sorry, I won't ever disappoint you again." And the medicine man said, "Well, I am never ever letting you look after my fire and my pot of medicine tea ever again." And Wigwas said, "Well, I don't blame you for that, but I do promise that I will always, always, always be your best medicine helper." And so in the end, what happened was Wigwas came to an agreement with the medicine man that even when Wigwas dies, he will still be giving medicine, such as in the form of chaga, which is a fungus that can be used for, for teas to help with things like, from what I understand, like as a cancer, help stave off cancer and so forth. So that's that story. But it's interesting when you hear these stories, even though who knows, trees may have been able to talk to people at one point. But there's a lot of stories all over about how people and animals always used to be able to, talk together. And if we've got stories that can go back, to prior to the last ice age, I'm sure that there's, and the stories about people talking to animals isn't isolated here. I mean, it's all across the globe. So perhaps there was a point where we understood animals and animals understood us much better. So we're getting close to the end. So I've done a lot of talking, and I've got a traveling song to wrap this up, but I wanted to see if anybody had any questions or anything before we do that.
So if anyone has any questions, they can put in the chat bar or unmute themselves and ask away.
Thanks, Barb.
I actually enjoyed your, just as they said, no questions, just thank you for sharing. Yeah, I really enjoyed your songs and your stories. Thank you so much, Nancy, for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, yes, absolutely. Let me put I'll put my here, I'll put my Nipissing email in here for you. If I can spell today. There you go. Okay, Candace. All right. Well, if nobody's got any questions, I'll just wrap this up with a traveling song, because the welcoming song brought all that, spirits or that good energy in here. And so we also need to, let it go and let them all go and carry on with their own lives. So this one's a traveling song that we sang in Wasauksing. So wake me up Way, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, oh. 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 Hey, 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 hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, oh. Way, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, oh. Way, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, oh. Way, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, oh. Yep, there you go.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Ah, you're very welcome. So,
Yeah, I appreciate it. I could have sat here and listened to your stories all day long.
I don't have that many stories yet. I keep saying I gotta go learn more stories.
Right. Then I'll invite you back again in the near future and you can tell
Oh
us.
God, now you put pressure on. Ooh. Anyway,
So thank
well,
you so much again, Nancy, and thank you everyone for participating today.
mhm.
Oh, somebody just,
Oh geez, Joss came.
they got the wrong time.
Oh dear. Well, maybe we can watch.
Yeah,
Well,
we'll have the recording, so
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I just want to say Chimigwich, Nyamagoa, and Masito to all of you. It's been a long while since I've been able to do this, so, and it's always fun. This helps change it up all the time.
Absolutely. Yes. I have to mention too, for myself, while I was a university student at Nipissing,
Mhm.
they had a powwow one day. And that
Oh
was
yeah.
the very first powwow that I ever attended to. And
Mhm.
it was just, I loved everything about it. I love the
Yeah.
colors. I don't want to say costume, that's not the proper word.
Yeah. Regalia.
Regalia, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love the regalias, just the colors and the music, everything about it. It was just wonderful. So I'm hoping to hopefully that they'll be able to have another powwow one day.
Well, I know they're in the midst of planning it right now, so
Oh, perfect. That's good.
yeah. Yeah.
Great.
So stay tuned.
Yes. And for Mel, who just joined us, unfortunately, I think you had the wrong time. The presentation started at 2 and is not. Sorry about that, but I can send you the recording if you'd like. You can write in the chat bar to answer or unmute yourself as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll need your, if you could just send me a quick email, Mel, and then I can forward you the recording once the recording is ready.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Barb, I just saw Barb's email. I knew Sharon saying that. Yeah, okay. Anyway, cool. Awesome.
All right.
Mhm.
Mel.
There we go. Mel, Frankie, or yeah.
Okay, so whenever the recording, it might be on Monday, Mel, but when the recording is ready, I will send you the recording of today's presentation. So again, thank you everyone, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of this beautiful day that we finally have, and
Yes.
the weekend that looks like we're gonna have. So
yeah, enjoy. All right,
Okay,
bye my pea,
bye.
bye my pea.